Hello everyone, Minus here, and we're in the home stretch here of covering the class changes for Pantheon Rise of the Fallen, which were unveiled via their website update on August 30th, 2020. Journey with us into the astral plane as we dive into Pantheon's Summoner. So starting at the general info at the top of the page, the Summoner's overall role has been listed as damage, changed from magical damage and utility previously. This is an overarching theme across all the class pages as VR has cleaned up the role of each class to provide more clarity. Resources are listed as only mana, when previously a Summoner's pet management or Archmental control was listed as a resource. I agree in removing this because unless there is actually a bar related to it, it's really just managing a pet. Armor was previously listed as cloth and is now listed as cloth and arcane shields. Previously, certain shields was listed under the available weapons category. Other available weapons previously listed were one-handed piercing, one-handed blunt, and two-handed staves. It appears to stay pretty close to doing the same here, as they now list more specifically dagger, club, stave, quarterstaff, and longstaff. Summoners are still listed as the same four classes of Darkmere, Elf, Human, and Gnome. I had some slight hope we'd see Archai as a fun little Easter egg reveal, as recently we've heard that Joppa has been discussing their rethinking of Archai being summoners, but maybe some other day. The new abilities listed, or at least changed, are the following. So Wind Archmental Zephyr is pretty much the same, however it now states that it's capable of putting enemies into a disoriented state. Earth Archmental Titan follows suit with Zephyr in being the same, however they now have a chance to put enemies into a state as well, this time fatigued. Fire Archmental Fury finishes the trio of pet changes by being able to put enemies into a burning state. So a quick note on this is that it's really nice to see the pets are all involved in creating states, which ultimately could benefit other classes greatly. This adds another layer of pet usage strategy that previously was not the case, as states were not fully announced at the time. Mana Shield has changed in wording slightly, as it says it saves you from a percentage of your total health and spell damage, no longer stopping it completely, but also makes it so that the magical effects or debuffs cannot land on you if properly timed. So the biggest thing here with the Summoner is that with only 13 abilities on the page, there were a lot of abilities that were removed or being left out for now. That said, while I was upset with some of the omissions from the Druid class page, another pretty heavy spell-bloated class, I think that the Summoner still plays well to its core functionality as a pet DPS class. All of the Archmentals are listed with their core damage focus types, and the very important spell, Archmental Mastery, gives players insight into how they will be able to summon multiple pets on the battlefield. The rest of the abilities highlight the Summoner's affliction for the Planar Realm, as well as summoning items for use by pets or players, whether it's armor, weapons, rafts, or walls, and also redirecting spells via portals that are summoned from thin air. While the following list is very long in the current omissions, keep in mind, as I've said many times, that this is not a complete ability list. Let's start by talking about pet abilities that are currently not shown on the site. Once again, it doesn't mean they're removed, but keep in mind they could be changed from what's previously said. The Water Archmental Undyne says the following. They had Crystalline Waters, a passive that made it immune to poison and disease, Ever-Flowing, another passive that gave the pet high HP regeneration. Now here's something interesting to note, is that it was said by Joppa that there will be no base combat HP or mana regeneration, so I'm curious to see how this has changed. Waterlash was a damaging ability that would also heal the Summoner and another pet at the same time. Healing Jetstream requires having the pet Zephyr out, and will work together to heal the pet as well as increase its attack speed. Protective Clouding is a teamwork ability with Fury, the fire pet, which will provide protective clouding that will heal Fury and make it harder to hit. Crystalline Mending is a partnership with the Earth pet, Titan, which allows Titan to absorb damage while also taking heals. And Crystalline Spear is a damage ability that will also have a chance to slow the enemy that it hits. Now the second Archmental is Zephyr. This wind pet had the previous abilities listed on the old site. Whistling Winds is a passive that allows the pet to double attack and dual wield. Windblade was an attack from close range behind the target. Gale Step would relocate the pet to the back of a target. Updraft would envelop the Summoner in wind and increase your speed, but however it would be broken if there was damage to the pet or the Summoner. Wind Lance was an attack that increases damage the further away the pet is from the target. Next up is the Archmental Titan, the earthen tank-like pet, and here's what was previously listed for the abilities. Mineral Embrittlement was a passive that allowed Titan's attacks to lower enemies' AC. Protector's Purpose, Titan would get a passive bonus to its own AC, which would be based on the summoner's base armor class. They had an attack named Mighty Slam, which was basically a direct damage attack, and they had an ability named Shifting Stones, which would root your enemy in place, but it could be broken by damage. The ability Grapple would taunt a target to attack the earthen pet, and Lasso of Vines would pull that enemy in with vines, similar to what we know of the Harpoon ability from Rangers.
Get over here!
Finally, the last of the Archmentals is the Fire Pet Fury, and here's what abilities were previously listed for it. Burning Aura was a passive which basically inflicted damage on any enemy that would attack the pet. Fire's Rage was a passive that states the lower your Fury's HP is, the more damage it does. Cinder Blast was an instant blast of damage to the enemy. Molten Spear would fire a shard of blazing mana at the enemy, dealing damage. Barren Burned would basically release a massive explosion from Fury, reducing its life and dealing high damage to all enemies within a radius around the pet. So aside from the actual specific pet abilities that each one had, the summoner itself had a few pet abilities of its own. Archmental Command can summon whatever Archmentals are out to yourself instantly regardless of the distance. Augment Archmental Quickening would increase your pet's quickness. Augment Archmental Density would increase your pet's Solidarity. And honestly, I have no idea what this means. An Archmental Force would increase your pet's power. Finally, Augment Archmental Metabolize would increase your pet's energy. So the last list of spells to look at here were the summoner's spells themselves, and here's the list of what was previously shown that is no longer on the site for now. They had the ability Summon Supplies Acclimation. This would summon supplies to help players in acclimation climates. Summon Food and Drink, which does exactly as it says. Summon Ladder so that the group can climb in certain locations. Bladed Missiles would damage enemies with a swarm of, you guessed it, bladed missiles. And Summon Creature was a really fun spell. This would summon a random hostile creature from somewhere in Terminus that could be charmed by an enchanter to be used in combat. Now, before you get any exciting ideas, summon creatures do not provide experience when killed. They also had an upgraded version of this spell, and it's interesting because I may be tempted to say that this would become a mastery ability, but you may still want to have two separate abilities for Summon Creature and Summon Behemoth. Summon Behemoth was basically just an upgraded version that would summon creatures of what are defined as Great Might. These are obviously very hostile creatures, and they won't be able to be permacharmed, and it will require an enchanter to have a bit more skill in charming to make it a pet. Weaponized Object would summon an object from nearby and hurl it at your enemy, causing damage. Shield of Spinning Blades would put a basically damage shield on your ally, which would give damage back to attackers. Mana Bomb would bind a mana ghost to the target and detonate it after a short time, dealing damage to the target and surrounding enemies. Avalanche was a charged ability which buries enemies in an AoE. Now the longer you charged it, the more damage was done, but it would also cost you more mana. Glacial Shard was another charged ability which threw a shard of ice at your enemy, and is similar to Avalanche, which was previously mentioned. It'll do more damage the longer it's charged, but also cost more mana. As stated earlier, there are a lot of omissions of spells on the website due to the limit of 13 spells currently being shown across all classes, but I still feel really good about the Summoner. While the only damage ability listed for the Summoner itself is Mana Boomerang, I think it's safe to say that a majority of the Summoner's power will come from its pets. The site does a good job of differentiating the pets with their short descriptions, and even showing that Undyne will benefit other Archmentals, as well as revealing that player will be able to have Undyne and other Archmentals out at once. Showing the ability to summon objects like weapons or armor for your pets or rafts or walls for your group tie into the overall feeling of Pantheon's Summoner. While it's a tough job to reduce down this spell list in particular, unlike the Druid and my very slight reservations about the Paladin page, they did a great job on Summoner in my opinion, as the spell list paints a very good picture into the class that will be heavily reliant on pets and some trickery. I also assume that we'll see a lot of these abilities return, especially those listed for the pets, if not all of them. I love the class fantasy of summoning a random enemy as well, and I'm curious to see what this leads to being so reliant on the enchanter. What do you think, Summoner fans? Are you ready to summon Archmentals to do your bidding? Join us as we continue to wrap up the remaining classes over the next week, and as always, let us know in the comments how you feel about what we're learning from these videos. Until next time.